here. You know, the Deputy Secretary of State, James Steinberg, or whatever. You know, any number of European foreign ministers or finance ministers. And you're going, I don't quite get it. I don't see where the press is. But I think what's happened is that they kept the lid tight for so long and for so many years that now, if you're in the media, you sort of don't, A, you don't really know about it that much, although that is changing a bit, and B, you're sort of a bit embarrassed to admit that you don't. So you kind of just ignore it. So I don't know. That's me trying to put a positive spin on the ignorance and stupidity of the mainstream media, of which I'm a proud member for a week.
Well, I mean, that was one of the other questions. Do you consider yourself a member of the mainstream media, or just, you know, a foot in each camp, as it were?
Oh, definitely, I do. I mean, I do, and I've been treated extremely well by The Guardian over for the last, you know, this will be my 4th year doing it. You know, they let me write what I want. They're extremely pleased with the amount of traffic the articles get on the web. You know, it goes to, I've had the articles be the most viewed on the website, and you know it's good. That shows that there's an appetite for people to know about this stuff, and it's just, you know, it's not some kind. It's neither a weird conspiracy, nor is it a supper club or a bunch of people playing a bit of snooker for a couple of days. You know, it's a very, very serious political event and historical event. You know, you mentioned you went back to the 50s. I mean, it goes back earlier. And, you know, you look at the people who in the late 40s are sort of maneuvering to set this thing up. And, you know, it's not set up by the Tooth Fairy and Mary Poppins. You know, it's set up by very senior members of the CIA and the British intelligence. And it has its roots in very dark places. And it still does. You know, last year, the keynote address was given by the head of the NSA. You know, it hasn't really changed. It's really very much. It's still this strange mixture of high finance, politics, and the intelligence services.
I remember when you first started covering Bilderberg for The Guardian, you were kind of tasked with writing a humorous, entertaining piece about it. I want to know, has your view of Bilderberg changed in those years? Has it become more kind of hardcore, or is it still in the humorous camp?
It's a bit of both, but I tell you what has changed is I've done a lot more research, and you know, something that you guys on INFOWARS or PRISONPLANET keep saying is, you know, read the documents, just read the documents, and you can do that. And Bilderberg is a very good example of that. You can read this. You can read declassified cabinet papers. You can read stuff on really good stuff, academic work that's been done around the setting up of this and later on. And you can start looking as well. And this is very instructive. Just looking at who the people are that are sitting in this conference for these 3 days. And something that I wasn't aware properly, I've just discovered the presence of Goldman Sachs is a lot more than I was aware. I just by reading the people's where they sit on various boards. You know, you've got the chairman of Goldman Sachs International. You've got a member. That's Peter Sutherland. You've got Mario Monti. You know, who's the new Italian PM. He's a former Goldman Sachs international advisor. And you've got James A. Johnson, who sits on the board of Goldman Sachs, and those three are all on the steering group of the committee, so of the Bilderberg group. So I've only just learned that now. And you know, it's a big, long learning. But that's one thing I've learned is there's so much to learn. It's just frightening.
So, Charlie, we see thousands of people at these global summits. Why do you think the Bilderberg group, despite the fact that it has many of the same attendees, why don't we see a similar kind of protest group, especially amongst left-wing activists?
That's a good question. I mean, one thing is that my small experience of going along to these meetings, the people that do go and protest, and there really aren't very many, although it's been growing and growing to the point where it's in the hundreds now. They are much more switched on. They've got a much wider and deeper political understanding than you generally get and I'm just generalizing. And I think that they've had to obviously do a bit of digging themselves because this thing has been withheld from the public consciousness. And I've got for so long that it's just sort of it just isn't in people's brains to go along, weirdly. And I think that's changing. I think it really is changing. And I think this is going to be a watershed year. But if you look back, I've got a cutting from the Daily Express, a British paper from the 50s, and it reports a tiny little paragraph. But the substance of the report is that no one's really allowed to talk about this thing. And the problem is that for decades, simply no one talked about it at all. Very few people. And then now the word is spreading, and it's spreading, it's spreading through sites like INFOWARS, and, I'm doing my little bit, and the internet is churning it up, and people are starting to dig and look and understand. And so people are just starting to realize how important this meeting is. So I think everything's changing, basically. And I think, hopefully at the end of this year, we'll be going, wow, that was incredible. Look how many people turned up. There were 2,000-3,000 people. And I think it will, I live in hope.
So do you think there was a kind of stigma around it, which is rapidly disappearing, where it was seen as a concern of crazy, paranoid conspiracy theorists, whereas now people see it as a threat to everybody's freedom, no matter what political persuasion they come from?
Absolutely, and I've been involved a little bit in the Occupy movement in London, and they put out a statement recently when a member of an ex-Goldman Sachs managing director was being sort of manoeuvred towards possibly taking over at the Bank of England, because they understand that the great tentacles of Goldman Sachs are wrapped around the throat of the world, etc. And they've started to see through the corruption that they're objecting to, particularly on Wall Street and in London and in the big financial centres. They're starting to put two and two together and say, well, who are these people? And they're looking at Bilderberg and going, well, it's just them. I mean, if there's a group of people that as an occupier, that I'm particularly annoyed at, they're all sitting around a table with the politicians at Bilderberg. So they're starting to see that it's the same problem. And, and I think that the whole sort of left-right thing is going to start vanishing around. When you see the word Occupy Bilderberg, it's two words I would never thought to see together. A mainstream activist movement combined with quite an esoteric, or so has been for a while, esoteric political interest, Bilderberg. And I think that's going to start exploding these barriers that have existed. And then it's going to start being taken up, and it's just going to be used, understood, looked at, and hopefully just join the mainstream where it belongs.
And that's in no small part to your work and other people, like, for example, David Swanson, the big anti-war activist, came out last week and urged people on the left to join the Occupy Bilderberg protest. So that kind of synergy really is coming together. Just final question here, Charlie. Give me a Charlie Skelton survival guide for staking out Bilderberg. What advice would you give to people who are planning to make the trip to Chantilly next weekend?
Oh my goodness. Obey the law. Number one. Well, I say that. Bring a lens. Bring a big lens. Bring the biggest lens that you can get your hands on, because the more lenses pointed in the more places, it means that we, the alternative media, now to put my alternative media hat on, or such media as will be there, can start piecing together the real story of what's going on. And, someone last year got a glimpse of, I don't even know who it was, actually, I should be able to credit them, but took a photo through a car window and got a photograph of the Chancellor of the Exchequer, George Osborne. And through that photograph, it enabled us to do a bit more digging, a bit more journalism, and actually contact the Treasury and to establish that he was there officially. So be prepared to take photos and sit out in strange places watching cars whiz past you. But also be prepared to meet some amazing people. And, I basically, for me, apart from the first time I went, where it was just a nightmare and I got chased around by the Greek police, but every other time I get to meet amazing people who are, it makes you feel a lot less lonely. You suddenly don't have to take stuff for granted. You're not talking to people that you talk to people that know stuff, and you can begin conversations on a different level, and it's very nice. And I absolutely urge people to go. Any of your listeners, stroke viewers, who are even contemplating going, I would go, because it's an extraordinary spectacle apart from anything else. It's an extraordinary spectacle, and it's an important thing to go to, and you will meet amazing people.
And it looks like an all-time record in terms of protest numbers. I'm going to dwarf anything we've seen before. So Charlie Skelton, I mean, I look forward to reading your always excellent and humorous articles at The Guardian, which of course, as you talked about, just getting massive traffic through the Drudge Report and other promotion. And we look forward to seeing your work at Bilderberg 2012. Charlie Skelton, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you very much.
Again, I would urge you to subscribe at PrisonPlanet.tv. Of course, many of you watch this on YouTube, but YouTube doesn't give us any money to produce it. It doesn't give us money to pay for the cameras, the bandwidth, etc., etc. So we really appreciate your subscriptions at PrisonPlanet.tv. Of course, you get the live show, you get the Alex Jones radio show, full archive stretching back years and years, speeches, interviews, all that good stuff. And it all supports this network. PrisonPlanet.tv, 15-day free trial still running at PrisonPlanet.tv. And also, as you probably know, we've just launched Planet InfoWars, which is our huge new social networking website for info warriors. We're not going to divulge your information. We're not going to sell it to corporations like Facebook, Twitter. We're not a giant NSA database, and you'll meet a ton of like-minded, interesting people there. You can get your blog on there, organize activist events, all kinds of good stuff, and that's planetinfowars.com. That's going to do it for tonight's edition of InfoWars Nightly News. I've been Paul Joseph Watson. We'll see you on the next edition. Take care.